So this movie wants to be Shaun of the Dead so freaking bad. I'm talking about the Dutch movie Zombibi, at least I think that's how you pronounce it, also known as Kill Zombie if you are outside of the Netherlands region. So let's get one thing out of the way. This is a subtitled movie, or a Dutch spoken movie, so if you're outside of the area, you are going to have to do some reading in regards to the subtitles. So if you're not a fan of foreign films, then you may not like this movie to begin with. Now, I've mentioned the movie Shaun of the Dead. This film is literally a rip-off of that film. Now, you could argue that, Shaun of the Dead in fact was a homage to the sort of classic Romero zombie films. This isn't a homage, this is a rip-off. It even has a very, very similar plot. It really focuses on a kind of central character called Aziz, who's this kind of worker who's in this kind of dead-end, mindless job. And this just so happens to sort of take place in this sort of zombie apocalypse, and he and a group of kind of motley crew survivors are trying to escape this kind of zombie-affected zone, as well as trying to kind of rescue this girl that Aziz has a bit of a crush on along the way. So it near enough is the same plot. Now let's talk about the humour. Shaun of the Dead was actually a comedy, really, more than an actual proper zombie film. And although you could argue that the Shaun of the Dead movie still took place in a kind of a real world setting, so you could still imagine that this film, you could take it seriously to a point, and you could imagine that this was taking place in the sort of real world. This movie you can't say that with. This film just goes a bit too far and borders on the kind of the parody. In fact, I'd say it even crosses over that line a few times. So some of these sort of situations that you're going to see here just go that little bit too far, just make it actually a bit silly. The humour in this movie is extremely juvenile. There are a couple of funny scenes, I will say that. There's one amusing scene where they simply can't kill one of their infected friends and he simply won't die before he turns into a zombie, which was kind of a little bit funny, but it's one of those scenes that is maybe played out a little bit long, a little bit like the Family Guy, I think sometimes is guilty of. But most of the times the humour here kind of misses, I would say. It just becomes across more along the lines of Benny Hill than anything I kind of watch these days. The zombie effects, for a relatively meagre budget, aren't too bad, and I will say this film does quite a good job of kind of world building, and we see quite a lot of external shots and kind of the sort of surrounding area of all the sort of devastation, and there's quite a lot of extras sort of dressed up in zombies and stuff like that. So it does do a good job of kind of making you feel that this is a sort of genuine sort of epidemic which has kind of hit this particular city, Amsterdam, I think it's taken place in. The other issue I have with this movie is the actual character. So the central character here is a guy called Aziz, and the problem here is he's the most boring character out of the entire cast. He is just your run-of-the-mill nice guy, and unfortunately has no real sort of redeeming qualities apart from the fact that we meant to believe he is this kind of nice guy. The supporting characters are a little bit more colourful. I'd have to say a bit more, they're kind of, again, just exaggerated. Like the comedy, they're sort of just exaggerated characters that don't really sort of seem like real people in the slightest. They're kind of fun in their own sort of respect. We also have some stereotypes cropping up. We have the typical sort of tough chick who's this kind of policewoman that Aziz ends up having a bit of a kind of a flirtation with to a certain degree. But again, that just falls into the same stereotype. There was a point where this kind of tough female chick was playing against type, and but now unfortunately that is the stereotype, and to be quite honest, the stereotype I'm getting a bit sick of. And also, they do actually make a point of that there's a couple of black characters here, and his brother assumes that they can sort of hotwire a car, which of course they end up having an argument, which is quite funny, and that obviously plays against the stereotype. Now, if you're a fan of the video game Dead Rising, this actually reminds me a little bit of that, because there's quite a lot of use of inventive weapons here. One guy, for example, he has sort of bowling balls that are stuck to his hands and stuff like that. So there's quite a lot of inventive weapons against the zombies, which kind of reminds me of that particular video game. So if you're a fan of that game, you may end up liking this film. It is quite fun, like I said. I do think most of the jokes miss, but there are a couple that kind of hit, at least for me. The zombie effects are okay, however the story and the characters are really not that interesting, and like I said, it just becomes a little bit tiresome because you feel like you've sort of seen it all before. So I'm going to give this movie a 4.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.